Why South Sudan? An Every Village podcast where we answer questions about the world's youngest nation. The question of the day is, why do you charge the South Sudanese for the radios? Hey everyone, my name is Tiana Johnston, and I am the host of this podcast called Why South Sudan? We have the Andrew Brown coming live here in the studio.
It's always good to be back.
Welcome back. We have just heard such great feedback, so I just think we should just keep you on as long as we can.
Well, thank you so much.
All right, so today's question, we are going to be talking about radios. Something that we have hit 170,000?
172,000.
72, there we go.
Yeah.
172,000 radios in South Sudan, which is incredible and amazing. And I know we've talked on previous episode about radio and the importance of radio. But I think this is a really important question because I know different ministries view different things. But I thought it would be a good thing to discuss, why does every village charge the South Sudanese for radios? So would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, man, you can go so many directions with this question. I just want to start by just trying to bring it to a similar context here in the United States and what it could be like. And Tiana, I'm sure you've been to conferences before where they oftentimes will have swag, is what they call it, right? Various magnets or little gadgets or gizmos or things, right? And they're typically cheap junk, basically, right? And I'm sure you've gotten swag before, and you brought it home, and you forget about it, or you lose it, or you're not really valuing it.
Goodwill.
You give it to Goodwill, right?
Yes.
Little tchotchkes, and I think about that as a good, just comparison for us to realize we don't value it because it's just cheap or it's free for us, and it's not something that we took ownership of. But if you instead go to a conference and maybe there's a singer that sings at the conference and you want to go buy one of their albums or a t-shirt or whatever, right? That's something you value, you're going to take care of. There's a big difference between free stuff and something you buy. And so, that's what we kind of, I would say, almost stumbled upon at Every Village with radios. Well, our very first time we brought radios way back in the day, I think it was 2010, we brought a batch of radios and we gave them away for free. And, we realized pretty quickly that, the feedback we were getting was, one is, people just weren't taking care of them as much. They didn't even necessarily see it as much of a value because it's just like, oh, here's another handout. And the South Sudanese, unfortunately, have been given so many handouts over the years because of the relief mentality and foreign aid. And so it's just another thing to receive. And, but then also it was causing fighting, between people when you're giving it out for free. Well, you're not going to be able to give it out to everybody. So who gets it? And the people that don't get it, then they start fighting, and it just caused problems in the community. So the very next time we brought radios, I think it was actually a couple years later, 2012, we decided, let's try this out. We don't know how it's going to work. But I remember making the decision to say, let's charge just a small price for these radios. We don't want to make it so inaccessible. These people are poor still. And the goal wasn't to run a for-profit business, but still we wanted to see what it would be like if we charged a little. And so we priced the radios. I think that first time it was maybe about $1 per radio. And it costs probably about $20 really to manufacture and get it all the way to South Sudan. And so we did that, and we saw we were shocked, but there were so many people lining up to buy radios, and there was just weren't enough radios, and we're like, wow, we hit on something. So the next time we brought radios, we said, okay, what would be a good distribution plan? And so we worked with local business traders, Christian business traders, and we said, hey, we'll bring some boxes of radios, and we'll let you buy these radios and then resell them in the market. And we did that, and the traders loved it. But we mandated a certain price, and we announced on the radio station what the price would be so that the traders wouldn't take advantage of people. we did that, and that's something that we've done a couple times, but ultimately where we really landed on the long-term strategy that we've employed for many years now is we recognize, you know what, these are really a great tool for the local pastors. Pastors are looking for resources and opportunities to do evangelism for the lost in their communities. What a great way for them to buy a radio and to give it, yes, for free as an evangelistic tool in their community. Or maybe it's discipleship for their church members, and their church members are buying the radio so that they can grow in the Lord. And so over the last several years, that's really where we've lined up, is using the pastors as a distribution network. And these pastors are the ones that collect the money from their churches. And so that was just a really beautiful thing for us to see. So what are the implications, and why have we continued to charge over the years? Well, some of the benefits we saw immediately was just a stronger sense of ownership. As you pay for things, you're going to care for it. There's dignity that comes with that. We often, we just have such a misplaced view of the poor sometimes. Mm-hmm. And we think that they're to be pitied and they don't have anything to offer. And that's just not true. Poor people are intelligent. They are generous. They are hardworking. Mm-hmm. They have a lot to give. And it steals their dignity if we look down and say, oh, you need me to give you everything. Mm-hmm. That's just not the way life should work. And how joyous is a partnership when, the poor communities are able to see that an organization comes alongside them. And yes, they provide in ways that they're not able to cover, but they're still giving the poor the opportunity to participate as well. And then it's dignifying. It is a partnership rather than a relief situation. So ownership, dignity are two huge ones. But we also saw an immediate just drive towards popularity of our station, and ultimately to increased listenership and then local ownership of the station at large. We recognized every time we brought radios, we were gaining a whole new family of listeners. And as we started to then hold local listener support campaigns, asking the communities for more money to give to the stations to support, we were recognizing, oh, wow, the people that are giving to our stations are ones that have our radios because they're bought in. They purchased the radios. They're regular listeners. They love this work. And now they're going to support above and beyond. And so we really started to see such a clear tie between the distribution of radios and the sustainability and ownership, local ownership of our stations. I've mentioned before, but these solar power radios that we distribute, they're fixed tuned to our stations. So when people buy them, they're listening to our station. And so that's a huge benefit. And then I would just say there's a huge internal benefit. It's not often as a ministry. It's easy. Businesses, right, have a built-in way to gauge whether they're effective in the marketplace. If they're not selling their product or their service, then it's because there's no demand, and they got to improve the product or their service or improve their advertising or whatever, right? They know if they're doing a good job. For ministries, we can hide behind donor dollars for years. Mm-hmm. And honestly, it's a sad reality. There's a lot of ministries, not trying to be critical, but there's a lot of ministries that probably aren't really making a great impact in communities. They're not really beloved or benefiting the communities that they're reaching. They're just continuing to pour money in because they get donor dollars, and there's no checks and balances there. Well, every village could fall into that same thing if we're not careful. Well, what are ways that you can measure your impact? Well, one of the clearest ways is the community, your beneficiaries, are they willing to pay for the services or the products that you're bringing? Mm-hmm. And that's not common in nonprofit work, but it is possible. And that's what we found with these radios. I loved it. For me, it would start to really concern me if we bring a batch of radios and they're not selling. Well, why is that? Is it because people don't want to listen to the station? Is it because there's too many radios already in the market? Is it because, what is it? Is it too high of a price? Well, so it's basically really allowed us to take marketplace practices into the ministry and say, okay, what is the demand for these radios? And our ultimate goal isn't profit. Our ultimate goal is the spread of the gospel, but we can, take those business practices. So I've loved that, and it's just continues to be a checks and balances for us. And so at 172,000 radios, we can confidently say, man, we haven't even gotten close to reaching the peak of our demand. There's still a need for more. Our radio staff continue to tell us, hey, please bring radios and don't bring a small batch. Mm-hmm. If you only bring 1,000 radios, it's just not enough. It really is going to hurt us. Like we need a lot more, right? And so I love that. And And as we expand our radio network, we're going to continue to need more and more radios. And so that's, I was talking with, our development director this week about this. It's just one of the challenges that we face as a ministry is the demand for these radios is so huge, and it takes a lot of money to fund these. And obviously the South Sudanese paying for them helps some of the cost, but really, it's mainly, just to provide that sense of ownership, and it does help with some of the operating costs of the radio stations there, but it's not enough to cover the radios. And so how do we year after year continue to expand our fundraising efforts for more radios, because of the demand is huge. So so many of these principles are found in the great book When Helping Hurts, and that book I've talked about before in this podcast, but it always asks the question: don't do anything for a community that they can do for themselves. And what are you doing for a people group that they could be doing for themselves? And you have to have the restraint to step back and say, no, we're not going to do it if they can do it themselves. And so it doesn't mean that we, I think that can be taken too far to the extreme where, you refuse to help anybody in need because you're worried about hurting them. Well, that's just not the heart of the gospel. A Christian way of life is to meet the needs of those who are poor and broken and hurting, and visiting the sick and all those things. So we do that, but we need to always ask the question, how can we involve them as well, or others in the community? So, a great example, again, is, inviting local pastors to come alongside of us in this process. We could just directly distribute to communities, and we've done some of that in the early years. We're figuring out the best distribution method, but we've realized, man, this is even stronger long-term for the community if we do it through the pastors. So now the community sees it's the pastors who are bringing these radios. That's a great way to do it. And so there's so much there that is kind of why we've chosen to charge for radios, and that's changed our approach in everything that we do. It's why we went with when we developed our water well maintenance program, the same deal. We asked communities to pay for the water services and to sign contracts with us, and we realized that's a great test for us. Is there a demand for these services? Are we fulfilling our word to them to where they're willing to pay for the services year after year after year? And that's our goal, to be faithful to that charge. And so I've loved everything that we've learned and the benefits of charging for radios, but it is unusual. I think a lot of ministries continue to give away things, and it doesn't mean that it's always wrong. Even us, we do distribute radios for free. I shared on a podcast recently about a blind woman who lives at a leper colony who received a radio for free. We didn't make her pay for that radio. So we have benevolence as well within our ministry where, we're bringing boxes of radios that we set aside to be distributed to the poorest of the poor. And that's right. And that's the Christian way to do things. But there's so many people that have the means to pay for the radios, and we love doing that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, something I'm very passionate about, especially with Every Village, is really the emphasis of empowering the South Sudanese. And I think especially when they've had, centuries of just receiving handouts, that becomes a way of life. It becomes a mentality. But when you empower them, they get this confidence. They get this awareness that they are capable and that they don't have to just depend on what is being handed to them. So I love, and I think also something else that they can see is they see where their investment is going. They see that the radio is continuing to thrive, and they're hearing their pastors on the radio and hearing community development and everything. But also they're seeing, they're taking, it's just such a greater value, but they do see where the investment is going.
Yeah. And that's it's nuanced, but it's so important because you're right. Like our vision is to build South Sudan as a nation for Christ, nation building. What does that look like? A developing nation. And so even the process of charging for radios, like you're saying, it's an intangible lesson, but it's a lesson nonetheless to the South Sudanese to see how things work. Mm-hmm. Nothing comes for free. Mm-hmm. There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? Mm-hmm. And when you've been given free, mm-hmm. That's the problem with drilling a water well and not asking the community to pay anything and just saying, hey, water's free. We understand in America, water's not free for any of us. We have a water bill every month,
True.
Right?
True.
And we'd be entitled if we thought that we deserved water, without paying for it. We think of it as a free resource, but it's not. We pay for it, and it's right for us to pay for it. the South Sudanese, unfortunately, have been trained because of years that they think of water as a free resource.
Mm-hmm.
That needs to change. So starting to see, for them to charge for radios or other things are small ways for them to see, oh, I do pay for this, but I get a real benefit and it's worth it. Here's real value.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing you just said is they see how it's impacting the radio station, how it's thriving and growing. That's the same thing as we've taken some of the funds from the radio income, and we have been able to build a new training facility on the radio property, or we've been able to buy a new generator or to do improvements. And we'll tell the radio audience, and thank them. Thank you so much for your contributions this year. Through your funds, we were able to do this or that. That's another great direct way for them to see, oh, wow, I'm benefiting this. And I just think about in the early years, we don't do trips anymore where we're distributing radios. Now we've got it down through our staff and through local pastors. We're bringing the radios and they distribute. But in the early years, we would take teams from the States and we'd go and distribute radios. And those were fun trips. You're traveling around different locations and you got thousands of radios and you got thousands of people coming to buy those radios. But I remember the first trip I was on, there was a radio distribution trip. And we brought a big black duffel bag. Probably, it was a huge duffel bag that could fit like a set of golf clubs, kind of thing. And you can imagine people are paying in just small bills. It's South Sudanese pounds is the local currency, but small bills, really filthy, dirty. They don't have banks. They don't have they're putting it under their mattress or whatever in a pot in their mud hut. And so, they're covered in dirt. And, but I remember we just, so many people coming, we're just like counting the bills and then throwing them in the bag. And at the end of the trip, we had this duffel bag full of cash. It was probably 45 pounds, 50 pounds of cash. It was crazy. Mm-hmm. It looks like you're involved in some illicit activity. And so we brought that back. On that trip, we brought it back to Uganda to count. We just didn't have time. That takes a lot of time to count. It's not like it's easy to flip through because it's kind of soggy and dirty and, it's just gross. And our guys in Uganda counted it, and it took them, I think, 3 weeks to count. And they got like colds and like sick from counting the money just because it was just covered in grime. Gross. It smelled bad. Anyway, but it was sad, too, because we learned from that, too, that was in, I think that was 2016, because that was the year there was hyperinflation in South Sudan. Mm-hmm. And so we had kept it in South Sudanese pounds. Well, by the time, 4 or 5 months later, it had dropped less than half of its value. And we realized, we should have changed it to USD because it's more stable currency. And so, again, our goal here isn't profit, but it was a good lesson for us to learn. And so, now when the staff are distributing radios through pastors, they're getting in pounds, but they're converting it to dollars much more quickly to stabilize it. So anyway, just some of the fun lessons we've learned over the years.
Yeah. I do something that came to mind even as you were talking, because you had mentioned about the water side SWC and how, we're teaching them to give towards water. And I've heard story after story where people will give to this person that's supposed to work for the government, and they're supposed to go to the government, and the government is then supposed to send somebody out to repair it. And that's something, I'm just so grateful, because this is where every village steps in, because we have integrity. We're going to show up with the repair parts, and they're going to sign a contract, and we sign a contract that we're in this together. And that, again, they see where their investment is going, that they know we're going to show up and we're going to take care of it. So I love that. Yeah,
there's a lot of poor people that are taken advantage of. And that's a sad reality of our world. And it does happen in South Sudan, like you're saying. So you have to have the integrity and the follow through to be faithful to your word. And then on the other side, there's a lot of just well-meaning donors who support, but what they don't realize is happening is that the South Sudanese are being left behind in it. They're getting handouts, but they're not getting hand-ups, and for that reason, they're still stuck in the same way of thinking, the same way of living, year after year, generation after generation. It's never changing, but we're starting to see that change, and it's a really exciting part of this, and And I do think that, particularly with these distribution of radios and selling the radios, like I said at the beginning, we stumbled upon this. We weren't planning on this strategy at the beginning, but after the first distribution where there were fights, literally fights to get the radios, we're like, we've got to change something. So we tried this out. It worked well, and we just gone deeper and deeper into it and realized, man. And after, what was that? I said 2012 was our first time we charged for radio. So 12 years ago, in the last 12 years, communities have come to understand that process, and it really has changed their way of thinking in so many other areas, like you're saying, and that's developing a nation. And it's a really awesome thing. So.
Oh, it's so good. Well, thank you so much for sharing today. This is such a good topic. I really, really enjoy it. And I love the emphasis of empowering the South Sudanese. Oh, it's so good. All right. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. Again, I really appreciate it. So we invite everyone back to the next episode as we do something a little fun. Andrew is going to take the hot seat, and I guess technically I will be in the hot seat. He's going to be interviewing me. So the question of the day is, what's it like to live in South Sudan? Take care.